Welcome to the What We Carry podcast by Jack's Caregiver Coalition, where we believe no man should care alone. We are a community dedicated to improving the way guys think, feel, and act through every phase of their caregiving journey. Whether you are in the thick of a diagnosis, navigating the transition to grief, or finding your sequel after caregiving ends, this is your space. Now here's your host.
Welcome, friends. Kyle, Woody here, Jack's Caregiver Coalition. I'm here with Chris MacLellan of the Whole Care Network and with Jeff Myhre, also of Jack's Caregiver Coalition. Welcome, Chris, and welcome, Jeff. Thank you.
A great afternoon to spend with the two of you.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Chris, for helping us get this podcast back up and running again.
We're thrilled to have you back on the Whole Care Network.
Yes, we are. I don't follow a ton of podcasts. I do follow a few, and there's been several that I've been exposed to on your network that were delightful. You've put together a wonderful community of podcasters serving caregivers, and we are grateful for that. We're also grateful that you're a member of our coalition, and you have been probably since you and I met, I would guess 8 or 9 years ago at this point.
I think it's kind of right at the beginning because I was starting the Whole Care Network right at the same time you were developing Jack's, and it was just kind of like a natural connection because we're two people that are really passionate about sharing stories and supporting caregivers in a variety of ways. And for me, it was through podcasting, and for you, I mean, goodness, look at how you've grown Jack's over the last 8, 9 years. It's just great to sit back and watch what you've done from how many people you've helped over the years.
Yes, we're delighted to have that privilege. And I remember speaking with you, I can't remember what I had for breakfast, but I do remember hearing your story, and that memory was of an article that was written about you and your husband and the awful situation where you were trying to show up for him in the healthcare setting in Florida, and how impossible that was. And if you could just share a little bit more about that, because I suspect that experience is what inspired you to start this network.
There's a phrase that I always use. Every caregiver has a story, but not every caregiver gets a chance to tell their story. We were fortunate that our story was told in a 2014 Pulitzer Prize nominated caregiving story, In Sickness and Health, A Couple's Final Journey. And what I learned from that experience in 2014, and now it's unbelievable, we're in 2026, that it's our stories that really fulfill a caregiver, because we realize that we're not alone when we share our story. It's very cathartic. It's cathartic for the caregiver to tell the story, and it's real cathartic for the caregiver to hear another story, know that they're not alone. And that's really was my purposes for starting the Whole Care Network, to give caregivers the opportunity to not only to share their story, but to listen to other stories. And somewhere along the line, we're now approaching over 4 million downloads of all of our stories. So, this little mom and pop network, well, without the mom, but we're just trying to make it impact so that people can find the information and resources like Jack's that are out there, that not that it's hard to find. It's just that caregivers don't know where to look when they're in the middle of a crisis.
Yes, well said. And thank you again for bringing us together again, Chris, for this. We are so excited. And I'm going to turn our attention over to Mr. Myhre, who's, speaking of stories, the way that I met Jeff was his lovely bride reached out to our coalition. She is a supporter of the ALS Association. And after her and I met, she said, "You have got to meet my husband." And he ended up volunteering to help us. And I think I don't know, Jeff, would you say it was the second meeting? I don't remember, but it was very early on. And I said, do you want a job?
It was the first meeting.
Was it the first one?
Yeah, it was the first one. Yep. So my tenure as a volunteer was maybe 15 minutes.
Yeah, that's quite the tenure. We are so blessed that Jeff was willing to come to work here and that he's still working here all these years later. Jeff, tell us a little bit more about why you said yes.
I always tell people that the reason I said yes, an enthusiastic yes, is because I really fit the suit. I am a 2-time caregiver, and way back, I lost my first wife to metastatic breast cancer way back in 1997. The caregiving journey was rough, and what followed was even rougher. And part of that was my decision as a relatively young guy to kind of close up shop. And what I realized when I had another opportunity in 2014 to become a caregiver, and I thank God I realized it way before 2014, was that reaching out is everything. And I am a true believer in reaching out. So the second time when I became a caregiver to Jennifer, my current lovely wife who you just mentioned, I did everything the exact opposite. And my second journey as a caregiver was all about reaching out and saying yes. As a matter of fact, you can mow my lawn and things like that. So when Kyle started talking about this mission, I'm like, yeah, well, I've kind of lived this mission. So yeah, there we are.
That's great. And there's so much more to Jeff than those two stories, the caregiving parts of him. He brings an enthusiasm and a creative energy to the work that we do here that has inspired me, and it's inspired many, if not every single caregiver that he's connected with along the way. It's really his fingerprints all over this coalition, whether it's just the general vibe. I think he spent a little bit of time hearing like "You're not Kyle" from a lot of our community, but that I don't think he's hearing that anymore. And it's for the next person, it's probably going to be "You're not Jeff." So I hope not, but he is a big deal around here. And so thank you, Jeff, for joining us today.
Kyle and Jeff, one of the many things I've learned over the years, and I think it's proving it here today because I'm just getting to meet Jeff. There's no strangers when it comes to caregivers. We may not know each other personally, but when you meet a caregiver, you understand the story, you understand the journey. I know that word's a buzzword, journey, but it really is a journey for everybody. But caregivers have this innate ability to understand it. And Kyle, what you've created here through Jax has allowed people to feel comfortable in stepping outside of themselves and into a group that can be supportive.
Yeah, and it wasn't just me that started this. There's a whole group of people. I'm just a cog in the wheel. But yes, we hear it all the time. It's just this simple idea that if we consider that identity, that, we might be a caregiver, just that alone can transform what is, for most who come to us, a private burden. And it can transform it into a shared identity. And for many of the folks who we connect with, I think that's the single most important thing that happens as a result of that connection. And it's a beautiful thing to see. And, something that's coming to me as far as what our listeners may be wondering, especially the folks who've been a part of our coalition for many, many years, is why are we starting this podcast? Why? What's the purpose here? And when I think about that, for me, it is for many, many years, I've not really approached our work through a lens of visibility, finding ways for more people to discover us. Then when that started to shift, like for us to be successful to hit our goal to strengthen 1 million men by 2035, got to get our message out into the world. And it's difficult because the nature of the work that we do is so intimate and so private. And, you know, the groups that we hold, we've had folks want to come take pictures. We've had folks want to do videos. We've had all that. And I want that too, parts of me, because I want people, and so does Jeff, to know what we're actually doing, because if they could feel it, they would be energized. And so this is something that I don't remember whose idea it was or where it started. Maybe you do, Jeff, but it was like, maybe this is how we do that. And Jeff has taken one of our principal programs, the Clatch, and just made it, you know, he took where I brought it to, and he's brought it to an entirely new level. So we thought, well, what if we could, you know, we can't bring the cameras and the, you know, the recorder into that room because we would be violating the privacy of the people there, but we could tell stories about what's going on in these spaces and what people are talking about. And so that's the why, is we want to give people a sense of the community that we've built. And so Jeff or Chris, would you add anything to that as far as the why behind why we're here?
Yeah, I'll just say that I just met with a Jack about an hour ago, and you know, he looked me straight in the eyes. He was a gentleman who lost his wife. He looked me straight in the eyes and said, you know, this is really important. Um, and I feel that, from many of the guys I speak to, and I think what he's saying is this refers to connection with somebody else. And for a lot of the guys that join us, they're, you know, they become a Jack and they sign up on our website, but the belonging is very important to these guys. Belonging by coming to our support group Clatch once a month, or belonging, having an inkling that if too much time goes by or a lot of time goes by, they're going to get a call and we're going to check in on them. And so I think the why is a big reason, or is a big question of, you know, why I do this. And I get to see it every day. It's, I wish everybody could see it every day, but I get to see it every day. So.
Yeah, and I get to make guest visits to our groups once in a while. In fact, last Thursday, was it, Jeff? And I
Yes.
had the honor of leading our caregiver Clatch after a long, you know, vacation from that role. And there was 15 people around the table in a brewery in St. Paul, and 14 of them were men. One of them was a woman, and that's not always the case that everyone's welcome to our groups. I've seen Clatches with more women than men. We don't prescribe a ratio. It's just whoever shows up. But I have been to many, many of these groups over the years, and that was far and away the most heartbreaking and inspiring Clatch that I've ever participated in. And, you know, and that's why we're here, is to tell these stories and lift up what, and I'm just going to tell one because it's on the top of my mind. And that is, we started sending welcome letters to our new members. And I was joking with Jeff the day that we started that, because we had 3 new members in one day and I couldn't keep up with the letters. And I was just like, hey man, you're killing me over here. I'm just writing letters all day. And at the Clatch, one of the gentlemen shared that his person who he's caring for found that letter and said, "Hey, what's this? You're not what basically you're not my caregiver." And he and her got in a huge fight about this. He said it was a 3-day fight and that it wasn't even over. And I was absolutely, my jaw was on the table. I had never considered that this welcome letter would cause this, this kind of thing. And that isn't, to cast judgment on anyone involved in that. It is just what fascinates me is this identity question, because in that scenario, here's a guy who is ready to lean into this idea that he's a caregiver, but the person he's caring for is not ready to lean into the idea that she needs a caregiver, is what I'm kind of took away from that. And what a beautiful thing it was to see the other 13 people around, the other 13 men around the table. There's not a solution, right? Like, we couldn't say, well, just, say X, Y, or Z or do. It was just like heartbreak and encouragement that he walked out of there with, and solace perhaps. But I was so proud and so just, and that's part of what I think keeps Jeff and I going in this work is it's fascinating. And I've heard people say, if you've met one caregiver, you've met one caregiver. And that has absolutely been our experience, that these stories, you said you got 4 million downloads, Chris. Well, I believe it. And because these stories are, I had the opportunity to tell my story on Oprah's podcast recently, and she
That
said
was
to me,
awesome,
like,
by the way. That was freaking
thank you.
awesome.
Thank you. It was an incredible experience. But she said to me after I told my story, people ask me all the time, who is it that's the most interesting to interview? Which celebrity? And she said it's not the celebrities, it's the everyday, regular, real stories of real people. And I could not agree more. And that, the story, that one clutch, Jeff, I mean, there was probably 4 or 5 stories that we were all just, I think, just in awe that they shared it. They said it out loud. And I suspect probably for the first time ever, certainly in a group that large, but maybe for the first
Felt
time
like they were in
ever.
a safe space, and that's
Yeah,
so important.
absolutely. Yeah.
Sometimes I've been told that this is kind of controversial, but I think it's real. I mean, there's not too many new things you could tell a caregiver, self-care, all the things that you should do and could do. But the new things you can tell a caregiver is that story that they haven't heard before, so that somebody understands what they're going through. And then that makes that advice about self-care and all those things that are so common, what we would tell a caregiver, it makes it really hit home. And because for me, it's through story sharing where diversity meets the road to collaborate on a common cause. And that's what this whole massive role of a caregiver is. It's a common cause that we all experience, and we want to be able to help that next person that's coming up, because we're all going to need a caregiver eventually.
Absolutely. How would you say, Chris, that your caregiving story changed you? What was Chris before that, and what is Chris after that?
Yeah, I think we're now 14 years past. I think in the middle of it, what it taught me really taught me about what love, care, and commitment is all about. And as a man, I understood. Of course, I went from this. Got to inject something funny here. I have 4 older sisters, so I was trained well. But as a man, what I got in touch with in the role of a caregiver, especially for a spouse per se, what it must have been like for mothers, women raising kids doing it all by themselves. Uh, cooking meals, doing laundry, all those things that, is we kind of take for granted because that was the role. But then all of a sudden, when you're in the middle of doing it for somebody that you love and care for, you wonder laundry, work, social life, well, whatever happened to the social life. I came away with a more appreciation for what my mom did while raising 6 kids. I do think I identified more with the role, with the so-called traditional role, which I don't think really plays into effect, but you have a better understanding of what it really takes to do the things you need to do in order to care for somebody else.
Yeah, that's beautiful, and that explains a lot, Chris, that you have 4 older sisters. And so I'm gonna shift to you, Jeff. Like, what would you say about how your caregiving journey changed you, or if it changed you?
Oh, it definitely defined me. I'm sadder and wiser and also more optimistic, infinitely more optimistic. But what I know for certain as particularly the first, no, I would say both caregiving roles shaped me as a person. My first caregiving role taught me, um, that life can be unfair and hard. And in between, I learned that, yes, indeed, that is true, but there is also room for um, lots of joy and lots of optimism and lots of hope and lots of fun. And my second caregiving role really, really informed me on how to be. I was, in a way, I was ready. I was shocked that I was going to go through this again. But in a way, I was ready to, like I said, do the exact opposite. So I see these guys, I talk to these guys, and this experience, whether it's, you know, new or they've been a caregiver for multiple years, it defines us. I truly believe that. And that may sound pessimistic, but I believe that's what is. And all the more reason for organizations that support people around specific diagnosis, or organizations like Jack's that, where we kind of say, we got you. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
That defining us, it remind this question of what defines us, a question that I think many people haven't really thought very hard about, but folks going through a crisis, eventually they confront that question. In my case, my wife, Sarah, who was diagnosed with metastatic colon cancer, when she was first diagnosed, I remember her first blog entry. It was like, I am absolutely not a fan of this colon cancer identity. She's called it like the least sexy of the cancers, like who as a woman wanted to talk about that? But eventually she struggled with that disease for almost 9 years. It wasn't very long before she started to consider accepting it. And then she was walking around the Mall of America with a plastic mask over her chest, promoting colon cancer awareness and colonoscopies. So that happens, but it's a difficult thing for people to confront. And I think what's also true is, going back to that class we went to last week, Jeff, the question I asked in the intro was, what is a topic that you could give a 20-minute talk on with no preparation? And, these questions that we ask are designed to connect us with each other in around some other thing that defines us outside of our caregiver identity. Because guess what? You can be defined by that, and you can be defined by other things. It's not your entire self. And so we love to do that at Jackson, say, what just brings you joy? What energizes you? Where do you, and so often it's, Jeff, these guys, they've lost that, whatever that was. We had, I think, out of the 15, 6 or 8 of them say that they played an instrument of some kind. And after the clutch, they were talking about getting together for the joy of playing their instruments. And I cannot tell you how much joy that brought me to see these isolated, lonely, overwhelmed, worn out people who walked in the room probably feeling despair and anguish, to start laughing, to start connecting with people they never met around something that brings them joy. And so I think, and Jeff's taught me this improv principle, which is yes and. And that is the case here. Yes, you can be defined by your caregiving story, and you can also play the piano like it's going out of style.
Uh,
And it just makes me wonder, Chris, what else defines you other than your caregiving story? Like what could you give a 20-minute talk on with no preparation? And it can't be podcasting. It's got to be something else.
Very good. Well, I appreciate you asking that, Kyle, because it took me a while to find my identity after the caregiving ended, because for so many years, that was the identity. And I think coming full circle for me, as I just hit my 69th birthday, I'm in the midst of reimagining myself. I'm still involved with the network. I'm out using my talents and skills I've got some small acting gigs. I've done some commercials. I'm really embracing what my talents and skills are as a senior. I'm very grateful for the contacts that I've made through the caregiving community. And I'll always be a part of it in some way, but I think it's also important that you have to find your identity after caregiving ends. And that's a whole different conversation I think it's happening more now in the caregiving community than it did 12, 14 years ago, is that there's two realities in caregiving. There's a beginning and there's an ending, and we're not prepared for either one of those life-changing events. And after it ends, some of us stay in as an advocate, but then some of us move to something else. But I think to come full circle with the answer to your question, it's about finding your identity. And I kind of turn the phrase around. It's stepping into your comfort zone, not stepping out of it, stepping into things that you want to do. Playing the piano was like, oh my God, that resonated with me. But it's doing those things that you didn't get to do while you're in the midst of caregiving that solidifies what you really want to be and what you want to do. And for me, it's these acting gigs and these commercials that have come my way. I should have grown the gray beard earlier, but that's what's kind of getting these gigs and bringing me joy and happiness, because invariably the caregiving conversation comes full circle, and you know that you're helping somebody in the midst of it while you're not really totally involved in it.
That's wonderful. And your beard is spectacular, by the way. Absolutely spectacular.
Thank you.
And the three of us with our bald heads and our glasses and our beards.
I imagine people watching this might have to have sunglasses on because of the shine for everybody.
Oh, there we go. Now we got our glasses. And Jeff, what he shared at that Clatch that he could give a talk on for 20 minutes was, and go, Jeff, I'll just let you share it.
Comedy theory.
Coming from you.
Comedy theory, which is one of the unfunniest topics ever. Explaining why something is funny is incredibly unfunny.
It's a great way to make something not funny at all.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think, I just want to, for a moment, talk to a gentleman that might be listening. And I want you to hear me loud and clear, sir, that you're not alone anymore. If any of this is resonating with you, if you're feeling isolated, overwhelmed, just worn out by the uncertainty of the situation that you're in, the three of us see you. We desire, I think, more than anything else, to have an opportunity to connect with you. And if you'll give us 15 minutes just 15 minutes. You can book a free call on our website at www.jackscaregiverco.org, or just go to the Google machine and type in Jack's Caregiver Coalition. It'll take you right to our website. You can book a call with us with a few clicks. And if you give us 15 minutes, I guarantee you will walk away from that feeling like you're not alone anymore. And so we would just be delighted to have that opportunity. So that's my Jack's commercial. Shifting back to how we might wrap this up. I think, we've talked about what inspired the podcast. Let's visit on where we see it going, like what might be coming next. Jeff, maybe I'll start with you. There's a couple of
during each of the clatches, I get to be at all of them. We have 2 clatches, one for what we call sequel makers, and those are people who have lost somebody. And then at a different time, we have another clatch for active caregivers. And during those, I don't even need to really listen very hard for an aha moment, a peak thing that happens in all of these meetings, because you can feel it in the room when somebody brings up a question or something that really chaps their hide, and usually that statement or question brings responses from nearly everybody. Virtually everybody weighs in, and so I thought a really good way for us to establish a topic for each of our podcasts is to base it around one of those questions and have a guest that maybe was there or maybe just knows Jack's or is available, but somebody that can speak to that topic.
Yes, that's a beautiful way to bring, again, these stories forward. And the way that format works is we democratically select the topic. So we vote on which one resonates with folks in the room the most. And so it's a way for people to get a taste of what we discuss in these groups without showing up. And so I think for those that are listening, if, the idea of walking into a group is a little bit overwhelming, the first thing I want you to know is there are many men who come to us who never come to groups. They go into our Jack to Jack program, which is one-on-one support. And it's very much around your schedule because we understand that you don't have time and margin in your life to come to this thing on a certain day of the week. I also I think for maybe folks who are, whether it's with Jack's or any other community, if they can't figure out how to get the margin in their life, or they're just, like I was, they're convinced that going at it alone is the best way forward, is to know that for so many of the men we serve, Jeff talked about the check-in calls that he does. Most of the time, what he hears back is, I'm okay and things are going all right. And I'm just so grateful to hear from you. Thank you for the call. And it's just nice to know that you're there, that someone's there who cares. And so there isn't a quota. This isn't a program where you have to come to a thing on a certain thing and check these boxes. And, it's actually, I don't want to say no work. That isn't true. There is some work involved in showing up for your coach. And when your coach helps you see something maybe that you hadn't observed before or realized, that triggers change in you likely. But it isn't what I think a lot of people are worried about, which is I'm already overwhelmed and I'm going to sign up for this thing and have to do more. And everyone's telling me to take care of myself. It's like a joke, you're
Right.
like, I can't even keep up with tomorrow. I don't even, I've got, every time I go to the mailbox, it's full of bills that I can't pay. And And so, if that's you, like, we see you, and we know because the three of us have been in that situation.
Mm.
And so that's what I want you to hear is, if you can give us 15 minutes, that may be all it takes. You might say, "Hey, it's just good to know you're there, and I'll reach out when I've got a question or I've got a need that's specific." And that could change the game for you.
It's because asking for help is not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength.
Absolutely. And that's what Jeff learned from his journey, right? Like, reaching out is what he called it. Some people say asking for help. I like to say speaking up. How many, of us are taught that, strength is silence
Right.
and just suppressing it? And we're redefining that as a coalition. We're trying to say that is not true, especially when men are struggling to suppress and silence yourself
Mhm.
and suffer in solitude. Who benefits from that?
Nobody benefits.
Nobody.
Mm.
And so we encourage you to consider speaking up and bringing your truth forward. And you can do it one-on-one with a coach. You can do it in a virtual class, like choose your own adventure with a social worker, with a therapist, somebody. Get yourself in front of someone, and I'm not wagging my finger at you. This is encouragement, but please speak up. Please reach out. You'll be glad you did. Thank you, thank you, thank you to Chris. Thank you, Jeff, for showing up here today, and to each of you who were kind enough to give us your time and listen to the three of us blither on about caregiving. We're so delighted you did so. And if you were inspired by this, please share it with someone else too, because I think, Jeff, our marketing budget's about the size of a fifth grader's allowance. So what we need is for people to share.
This is
And so please share it.
If you found value in this episode, please share it with another Jack who might need to hear it. You can find more resources, join a group, or support our mission at jackscaregivercode.org.